welcome to the Walton Township Board of Education Tuesday, May 12, 2020, regular business meeting. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smythe, can you do a roll call?
First, I'll announce that this is the Walton Board of Education meeting, for which adequate to the Open Public Meeting Act was provided by notice to the Asbury Park Press, CoStar, Wall Township Public Schools, Township Clerk's Office, and posting in the Board Administration Office on January 16th, 2020. I'll take a roll call. Mr. Gartz.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Krupa.
I'm here.
Ms. Mangan.
Here.
Mr. Nasser.
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo.
Here.
Ms. Stites.
Here.
Mr. Wondrak.
Here.
And Mr. Adenizia.
Here. Thank you. At this time, could I have a motion for number 5 to go into executive session for letters A, G, and H?
I'll make that motion.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Just
Aye.
everyone in favor. Okay. We will be back at approximately 7:30 p.m. And just make sure you log out.
Good evening, Brian. Could you make me a co-host? Thank you. Okay, everybody is here. Everybody is ready. Good evening. At this time, we will reconvene the Wall Township Board of Education business meeting for Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Gartz,
Here.
Mr. Hall,
I'm here.
Mr. Krupa,
I am here.
Ms. Mangan,
Here.
Mr. Nasser,
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo.
Here.
Ms. Stites,
Here.
Mr. Wondrak,
Here.
and Mr. Adenizio.
Here. Thank you. All right, we are going to jump to President's report. The only thing I would like to say is last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. We mentioned during the workshop. Thank you to all our teachers for everything you do every day for our students and our district. You are appreciated, and we are grateful that you are all here. And our administrators, who were all teachers as well. Kind of, when we talk teachers, it does trickle up. So thank you to everybody. Superintendent's updates. Dr. Cram. Your speaker's not on, Dr. Cram.
There we go. In my role as acting superintendent over the past several weeks, I've continued to focus on the maintenance and improvement of the virtual learning environment and overseeing the planning of the necessary procedures for the end of this very unique school year. I've been in touch with Dr. Handerhan, the newly appointed superintendent, and we are beginning to plan for an effective transition. I will involve Dr. Handerhan in the planning process for the new school year and any decisions with impact beyond June 30th. A wall email address has been established for the new superintendent, and I know she will be reaching out to staff during this transition period. By the end of this week, I will have completed my meetings with each of the school's administration and district departments, and I will use those meetings as the basis for any recommendations I may have for the board and for Dr. Handerhan. Everyone I met with continues to be very candid regarding their operations strengths and the areas in which they would like to see some improvement. And they've consistently exhibited both enthusiasm and commitment to their specific roles and to the district. Plans are going to be finalized this week for teachers to complete the end of year checkout process and to prepare their classrooms for summer cleaning. We hope to have that all accomplished by May 28th. It was agreed that the teachers will be able to complete their responsibilities by scheduling visits with their building administration prior to that date. The staff will be asked to schedule no live lessons on the day that they will be cleaning out their rooms and completing their related school closing activities. We are suggesting the week following the Memorial Day break as the opportune time to do this. The principals, the SSOs, and the lead custodians will monitor social distancing, the wearing of gloves and masks, and will clean rooms and common areas that are visited by the staff. The discussion with respect to student desk and locker cleanout and material collections is ongoing. Plans for the students to clean out their lockers and return to the schools are still being developed, with several options being considered. The process will likely take place in June in as close proximity as possible to the last official day of school. Parents are going to be asked and will be asked this week to pick up medication stored at the school and a process for that has been put in place and notifications will be sent out. There are also plans to accelerate both contracted work and summer cleaning schedules, including the deep cleaning of the buildings to ensure that all work is done hopefully by late July, allowing for the potential use of the buildings if the quarantine restrictions are relaxed. The current virtual learning plan is again being modified and extended based on the continued monitoring of the current program and feedback from teachers and administrators. There will be an increase in the number of weekly live lessons at the elementary level and additional changes in procedures to address needs for improvement, which Dr. Gleason will report on. The revised instructional plan increases specificity and provides further standardization among the elementary, middle school, and high school divisions. Expectations for teachers will continue to be prescribed with respect to lesson planning, live lessons, small group instruction, individual lessons, and the use of instructional materials. Plans for closing school procedures, while not required by the plan, may be referenced in it. The impact of the extended school closure on existing summer programs has previously been brought to the board's attention with an emphasis on the need to expand and add to the traditional services. Virtual summer programs are being prepared at this point and will include virtual versions of several of the traditionally offered summer programs, as well as remedial offerings for students who we believe will require additional time to complete their course standards and requirements, and in order for them to be fully prepared for the new school year. Specifics regarding staffing, enrollment numbers, costs, and scheduling will be presented to the board. The program is being planned right now for late July and August as terms of a time framework. Eligibility will be determined by teacher recommendation based on students' performance in the online learning environment and will include consideration of missing and incomplete assignments, as well as a noted decline in academic performance. The program design will be a 4-day-a-week program with 3 live lessons per week. We have no applications for the use of indoor facilities under consideration right now for this summer because of the quarantine. There are several applications for outdoor facilities, and they remain on hold. We are requesting this evening for the board to revise the school calendar, which will eliminate the 3 emergency closing days that have not been used and will likely not be needed. And if approved, the last day for students and staff will be June 16th. In accordance with the most recent directive from the governor reinforcing Executive Order 107 and Administrative Order 2020-4, schools are now planning virtual recognitions and commencement exercises for on or about June 16th. The current restrictions specifically prohibit in-person graduations, parades, wave parades, proms, and activities inviting individuals to certain locations until such time as the governor's orders are modified or lifted. I know that the board and the administration, as well as the students in the community, remain hopeful that in-person commencement exercises and other celebrations will be able to be held later this summer. Now that it has been confirmed that schools will be disseminating plans for the virtual recognition of their students. Tonight, I'm asking the board to approve the renewal of staff for the 2021 school year previously discussed with the board. The recommendations are based on current staffing needs and the satisfactory evaluation of the individuals being presented. I should note that 4 individuals are not on the renewal list who did not receive satisfactory performance reviews and are therefore not recommended for renewal. We are accepting but not immediately acting on applications for new positions, current vacancies, and extracurricular and athletic positions. Most will not be filled until there is further clarification regarding the current school closing order, greater certainty as to the budget revenues, and further discussion as to the reopening of school for 2021. An updated seniority list is being prepared in the event that the district, for financial reasons, has to revise its staffing in the future. The plan for the distribution of Chromebooks to elementary students, excuse me, and a procedure for exchanging computers in need of repair is working well, thanks to the cooperation between the technology department, the operations department, and the building administrators. Several specific troubleshooting issues regarding internet access are still being investigated. A Monday, Wednesday, Friday pickup and delivery process for computer replacements has also been implemented. And Mr. Lee is continuing to work on a district technology plan that will be ready for the board's consideration next month. The plan will review the adequacy of the current available technology, its adequacy for long-term online learning, and projected future district needs. There's also before the board tonight several policies for a first reading. The policies were scheduled for first reading have been reviewed by the board and the administrative council. There was a modification requested by the board related to policy 5330 on the administration of medication, and that modification has been made. In the miscellaneous category, planning is underway in cooperation with the township for a Memorial Day virtual celebration scheduled for May 22nd. I want to say thank you to Matt Kokoda for producing a teacher appreciation video from the administrative staff that was shared last Friday along with the board that was produced by the video that was produced by the board. And just as a reminder, this week is National Special Education Week. In conclusion, I just want to again take the opportunity to thank the board for the opportunity to serve as the acting superintendent and for the support they provided. I look forward to setting the foundation on which Dr. Hanrahan can successfully begin her tenure as the Wall Township's new superintendent beginning July 1. And Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cram. So under Board of Education updates, I had the opportunity on Saturday evening to speak to Dr. Hanrahan, and I compliment my board members, my fellow board members on the choice. Just very pleasant and nice to speak to, and very excited, which is nice. I did speak to her because we did receive several emails this week. Dr. Cram responded to a few, I responded to a few about graduation. And clearly parents are very upset because we have to do virtual graduation, which is completely out of our hands. It's up to the governor's office. But with that, something that myself and Dr. Gleason spoke about, now it feels like years ago at this point, it was week number 2 when school closed, to keep in the back of our mind about a graduation, a live graduation. And we're committed as a district to try to do one in July or August if restrictions are lifted. And if the restrictions aren't lifted at that point, we could even look to Thanksgiving weekend when everybody's home from college, and hopefully everybody will be going off to college. So we're not going to give up hope on having a actual in-person graduation. We want the parents to know that. We want the students to know that. Even though maybe at that point they might be in college, it's still a memory that we hope that students that attended Wall schools will be able to have and cherish for the rest of their lives. You know, looking at the members here, there's 3 of us that are Wall graduates on the board now, and certainly, you know, no matter where you went to high school, it's a very important time in your life. So we are committed to that as a board and as a district, and we just want people to know that because we've been getting a lot of questions about that. With that, we will move on to number 12, public comment on agenda action items. If you have a question, please raise your hand.
Cross, I live in Wall Township. Just wanted to go over, I don't see your minutes. You're approving minutes, but you don't have them posted for the public to see. So maybe you should hold off on voting on them. I looked back at something in March and something didn't look right. So until you actually have them online for the public to see, I don't think you should be approving them. Your policy on supervision of construction, when you click on that link, it's not working, and I'm trying to pull up again what was there and what you were changing. Can Mr. Cram go over, you're going to open up public comment on that for the second reading, correct?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to save that one. I notice in the agenda, I don't understand why you're approving Mr. Smythe for 6 jobs right now. Until your investigation is over, he shouldn't be approved for anything. You have him down for board secretary, custodian of records, school funds investor. Meanwhile, we still don't know why we're not making interest in the bank. Board treasurer of school monies. He's down for the qualified purchasing agent, the bidding purchasing. I mean, he's not doing his job on so many of these items right now. The last thing you should be doing is approving him for any of these items. You have plenty of time to be doing it, and tonight's not the night, so you should be tabling it. You don't have him down for business administrator. I mean, it's just weird that you have him down for all these other things except for his main job. None of them should be on here tonight. Glad to see you're looking to change the education for the tuition and students like I've recommended for the past 3 years. And that we'll see the tuition in students for the Leadership Academy is now paying $14,000. Didn't make sense to only pay $7,500 when we're paying over $20,000 a kid. Have to say, still not happy with this online work that you're doing. And, you should have given an update. They're giving an update on graduation. Nobody would even know you were doing that. I know so many people are disappointed. I even see the things about the co-op purchasing pricing. I don't even know if you have any of the documents here. I did send in an email on that transfer for $50,000 out of judgments against the school district. I don't want anybody voting on that until you completely understand what Mr. Smythe was doing with that transfer. Because is that not going to show up as a judgment against the school district when it should with the auditor and for the state? I'm seeing a direct payment to somebody, and I don't know if that's correct. And I see it's down as a first payment. It just really stood out. Can you give us an update on what's going on with the trailers? Mr. Nasser said he was going to be updating me tonight. So before we go into second public comment, I want you to update me on what you're doing, and then I'm going to update you on where I'm at. On the agenda. Yeah, I don't understand why you had all the administrators there with blank numbers. It's very confusing. I went and looked back 3 years ago. You didn't do that. So you get me nervous when you start doing stuff like that, and maybe shoving in numbers at dinner time when nobody has a chance to take a look at it. I'm glad to see everybody's salaries are posted, so anybody can go online now and look anybody up. And they can also find it for the administrators. You should be checking what the administrators are making compared to their peers. We shouldn't just be shoving out raises. We see you having their 3.2 million, which is outrageous in this economy right now. You don't even know if the school is going to open in September. So you cannot keep functioning the way that you're functioning. It just does not make any economic sense whatsoever. It's completely dysfunctional. You're going to have people moving out of here in roller skates and in foreclosure. Nobody's going to be able to pay these taxes the way you keep doling out money. And you're at some point, you're going to have to start looking at it and just, enough already with giving out raises to so many people. Mr. Cram, let us know where you're at with your investigation on the trailers. If you could put that on the record tonight, exactly what documents you've gotten and who you've gotten them from. If you could write that down, Mr. Cram, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Cross. Your time is up. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none. Move on.
Ralph?
Yes.
Yeah, could I just address the one of the comments that Ms. Cross made here tonight?
I knew you were.
Yeah, I've seen a lot in around town about a $3.2 million increase in salaries. And I would be very interested when Ms. Cross comes up for the next public comment, if she could maybe give us exactly where she got that number from, because I checked all the documents that I have, and I think I have more documents than she has, and I can't find it. I do see a $2.4 million increase from last year, and then an $800,000 savings in benefits. And I don't know whether maybe she added those two numbers together and came up with 3.2 instead of netting them as a 2.4 an increased salary and 800,000 savings. Maybe she got confused. But the $2.4 million in salary, as Mr. Smythe explained last month, was the fact that she was going by budgeted amount last year. And what happened is during the school year, Mrs. Dyer requested, and the previous board approved, additional staffing. So when you looked at last year's budgeted amount for salaries, that was just a budgeted amount, and it was all real budget because all the contracts were settled, so everybody knew what the salaries were. So that number was a good, hard number. But during the course of the year, the school found itself by Mrs. Dyer asked for additional staff for, either additional aides or different people. So of course that salary number went up. And then of course this year we also in the last budget increased the number of positions by, I believe, 6.5. So again, those salaries would be on there as well. So when Ms. Cross says that there's 3 million in salary increases, that's factually not true. It's 2.4, but it's also not raises in the sense that everybody got a raise. It was the sense that this is what we spent on salaries last year. All right. Yes, the teachers did get a settled contract that gave them a raise. So that's factored in. That was almost 900 and some thousand just for that. And the rest basically were what the new positions would add up to. And then obviously the budget amount has to be, we have to budget for what the administrators contract may be. If there's savings in that, if we settle for less than what Mr. Smythe had budgeted in that number, then that will be savings that we'll find there. So I just want to make sure that when the public hears that we gave 3.2 million in salary increases, that was not people that were on the books who got $3.2 million more in salary. It was additional staff that created quite a bit of that. And of course, the teachers with their new contract, there was some increase, but that was from a settled contract that was done long before the pandemic. So again, that was just something that I just wanted to get off my chest because I think that's been out there for since last meeting. And I think what we need to do as a board is to make sure that the facts of these things get out there. And so again, I would ask Ms. Cross at the next public comment later on this evening, if she could just let me know where she got that $3.2 million number. I'd be interested in looking at that if what she says is true, which I don't believe it is. But again, we'll wait for her to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. And as for the policies, I was able to bring them up. So I don't know, maybe it's a technology problem on her end, but policies do pop up.
And Mr.
Yes.
If I could
Sure.
just also follow up on Mr. Hall's comments with regard to the presentation with regard to the increase in salary accounts, because that's what it is. It's increase in what was included in the budget for the current 1920 school year and what's being included in salary accounts in the 2021 school year. And as Mr. Hall indicated, there was a number of additional positions that were added to the current year budget after the budget was proposed and approved. A couple of the positions were based on school enrollment or student enrollment and class size, and additional sections were added in elementary schools. Paraprofessionals, if required by a student's IEP or due to the number of students in a self-contained class, we're mandated to provide additional paraprofessionals. So therefore they have been added to the budget, as well as a full discussion by the board, recommendation by the superintendent that we increase the number of school safety officers that we have in the school and change them from, school safety monitors to school safety officers. And so those salaries, which have now been added to the current year budget, have already increased from what we originally budgeted in 1920 to what we're actually spending in the 1920 school year. So, that's that's included in that number of the, 2.4, which is showing what was budgeted in salaries in 1920 in the presentation last April to what's being budgeted in the 2021 school year. So.
Thank you, Mr. Smythe. All right, at this time, could I have a motion for approval of secretary minutes, A through J, as listed on the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Seconded.
Motion by Ken, second by Russell. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Mr. Gartz,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Krupa,
I need just clarification. What are we voting on right now? Because my connection keeps going in and out. What item?
Item 13, approval of the secretary minutes.
Okay, I'm a yes. Thank you.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Yes.
and Mr. Adenizio.
Yes, thank you. All right. Number 14, policy. Recommend approval after public hearing for the first reading of the following policies. 1581, regulation 1581, 2422, 5330, regulation 5330, 7443, 8220, and 8462. We'll open up public comment on those. Is there any comments?
Mr. President, I'd just like to comment that the recommendation that was made by Board Member Stites to include the term physician's assistant in policy 5330 has been made, and that had a corresponding change then in the regulation for 5330 where we had to define that term physician's assistant.
Thank you. Ms. Cross?
Yeah, if Mr. Cram, Dr. Cram can just go over the change for that construction policy. And when did he receive the recommendation to make the changes? I know some of the changes that were added. If he could go over the it was confusing. First you had the highlighted parts, then you had the parts in black. Could you, I'm trying to pull that up at the same time. Could you go over?
Yes, you're making reference to policy 7243, which was
Yes.
recommended to us by Esme and Strauss as part of their ongoing service to the Board of Education, bringing to their attention the need to revise and update policies. There were two areas of expanded, I guess, language. The one was dealing with the reporting procedures on project progress, who is to do that, how often, and what kinds of things would constitute or precipitate there being a report filed on a construction project. The other category really dealt with the need to tighten up criminal background checks on contractors who would have access to students. The yellow section, I don't have the policy in front of me. My recollection is the yellow section that you're referring to was specific all Township Board of Education language that was already in the policy and goes beyond what would be recommended as the template by Esme and Strauss.
Yeah, if you could go over, did Wall specifically have any problems with their own contractors? Because I know over the summer, there were people on site with the trailers and they didn't have contracts. They said they were on the New Jersey approved vendor list.
Ms.
Did you
Cross,
find-
that is not part of this policy. Do you have a question specific to this policy?
How would you know if it's not part of this policy? I mean, they're talking about doing background checks on people, and I'm saying you had people on site with HDHI that were not on the approved vendor list. So I don't know what type of background checks you were doing, because all the documents that I requested were incomplete. So, I mean, some of them just didn't even come back. So I don't know what type of background checks you did. Do you know, Mr. Adenizio? Why don't you let me know?
It's not my job to do background checks.
Okay, well, whose job is it?
Okay, Ms. Cross, do you have questions on this policy,
I do.
specific to this policy?
I do. Who did the background checks on
Okay.
HDHI?
That's, Ms.
and make
Cross,
sure-
this policy that is before us, we're not talking about individual contractors or work that was done. We're talking about a policy here. Do you have any questions on this policy?
I do. I would like Mr. Gross to check into to be sure.
Okay, Ms. Cross, that is not a question for this policy. One
Mr.
last time. do you have-
Mr. Adenizio, I believe, and Mr. Smythe can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the background checks are required of the contractor and usually are part of the RFP process.
Mr. Smythe, that's true?
With regard to the background checks that are being proposed in this policy, it's criminal background checks, and it's for those employees of a contractor that would be in close within the vicinity or working in and around students. That's new to the policy, and that's what Strauss Esme has recommended.
Okay.
Did Mr. Smythe do background checks, the proper background checks
Okay,
on?
Ms.
each
Cross, that's got
side?
nothing to do with this. Ms. Cross.
Sure it does. That's why they incorporated that into the policy, is because people
Okay.
were hiring people.
Ms.
And you weren't
Cross,
doing proper
one last
background
time,
checks.
do you have any questions
I
with this
do.
policy?
I would like Mr. Gross to review with Mr. Smythe what.
Okay,
he
Ms.
did
Cross,
with
that is not a question about
hiring
this
the next-
policy. You are now over 5 minutes. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions in regards to these policies or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Number 15, Board of Education. I'm sorry. Someone say something?
Gonna vote?
Oh,
Need to vote.
I'm sorry. Yes. Could I have a motion on number 14 policies, first reading?
We took the motion, didn't we?
Oh, we did.
No?
You opened
we
up
didn't.
public comment.
Yeah.
So moved.
Could I have a second?
I'll second it.
Ken. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Krupa,
He's saying yes. He
Yes.
raised his hand.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Guards,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Yes.
Mr. Adenizio.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 15, could I have a motion on A through A through VB?
So
I'll
moved.
make the motion.
Oh,
Second.
motion by Ken, second by Russell. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Smythe,
No, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Mr. President.
Miss Megan,
Christine.
Christine.
oh, Christine, I'm sorry. Oh,
Yes, I had several questions on letter I, the approval of job descriptions. My question regarding the job descriptions, I went through all the job descriptions that are listed on the website. I guess my first question would be, there appears to be a number of job descriptions of positions that I don't believe, I could be wrong, but that I don't believe even exist in the district at this time. So I don't know if it's appropriate for me to be voting on a job description for a position that doesn't exist. And then the second, I guess, question that I would have is in looking at all these different job descriptions, it would appear that quite a few of them have not been perhaps maybe not reviewed or not resolved or revised rather. I mean, some of them in 20 years. So I would say that if we are voting on these job descriptions tonight, I guess I would just like to make the comment that I think at some point in the near future, we need to revisit these job descriptions and see if in fact they're still relevant.
Mr. President,
yes, Mr. Gartz.
could Mr. Smythe, maybe Dr. Cram or Mr. Gross let us know, to Christine's point, are these job descriptions that we create specifically for Wall Township, or are these required positions by the state of New Jersey that we're just filling to meet obligations?
Dr. Cram?
These are job description. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Cram.
Well, I mean, they're job descriptions that probably rely very heavily on existing templates for various positions that might be stipulated in legislation, but I'm sure they, over the years, they've been customized to specifically apply to conditions in Wall Township. I think Board Member Stites is correct that there is a need for those certainly to be reviewed and updated, and we'll put that on the to-do list of things that need to be done as the board moves forward.
Thank you.
If I might also add one other part to this, to answer Ms. Stites' other question. If a job is not currently filled by anybody, that would not preclude you or prevent you from approving the job description. Just in the case that the board would, during the course of the year, approve the job or approve someone for that job, you would have a job description already in place. So whether it's filled or not, or used right now, or just even an antiquated position that in all likelihood we're not going to fill, you could still have that job description on record. The reason you're doing this, it's an annual approval. You're doing this as part of your April or May board meetings as an annual approval to make sure that job descriptions are approved by the board on a yearly basis so that they are used for those positions.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Aaron? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
So during workshop, when I had brought up the out of district students who weren't residents of Wall Township, and the yearly tuition was increased, I'm seeing that it was only increased about 500 per category. So doing a little research, I want to just clarify with Brian. I was able to find it was $17,730 per pupil. Is that correct? And on average we spend?
That's the calculated regular ed tuition rate for, I believe, the high school. I'd have to check the actual number. Are you looking from a guidelines for spending, or are you looking at our tuition?
Just like a guideline per spending, like any student within our district on average, how much do we spend per pupil? Because I found it was like 17,730. And I know that's very different from an out of district tuition student, but there's such a variable that, you know, only having 5,500 for an elementary student. I mean, preschool tuition rates are more than that, you know, these days. So I was just looking for clarification that what do we spend per pupil in our district?
I would have to get the exact number. There's also budgetary comparisons and total spending comparisons where there's a significant difference because total spending includes transportation and some other costs that budgetary, which are mainly used for comparison purposes, does not. But the one thing we have to consider is when we're looking at the numbers of $18,000 a year for tuition, that would be the certified tuition that we would charge another school district. This is private and this is strictly set by the Board of Education, and it doesn't have to be, you know, comparable to what the certified tuition rate is that we would charge another school district.
And I agree. I was just, you know, thinking more along the lines that elementary would end up at least at 7,000, you know, in comparison with other districts that I had mentioned, such as Ocean, who were in that price value range. I just don't see how only having gone up $500, that's an extra $50 a month for a family, you know, when we haven't raised these rates in so long, and we're, you know, at a place right now in, you know, in our schools where, you know, we have a lot of students in these classes and we're trying to keep class sizes, you know, small and teacher ratios small to the students. So I just thought it was a little, I thought the number was going to go up a little bit higher. That's all.
Mr. Anizio, could I comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Gross, please.
So we did, Aaron, to your point last week, have a discussion in F&F committee this past week, and there are 22 students that fit the parameters of which we're referring to, is what we learned. Correct, Mr. Smythe, if I'm wrong, you don't have to say anything, but just chime in if it's wrong. And what we decided was we looked at it from across the board in different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And while we agree we are behind and can increase, we chose not to increase it too much in this year because the upcoming year is right upon us and those rates are going out to everybody. And we wanted to make sure that we also didn't scare people away by jumping too much because that revenue was already part of our budget decision. So we do have a plan to revisit and look at it maybe over a longer period of time. We just didn't feel as though a huge jump in a 2-week window of time, 3 weeks before they're ready to enroll, was something that we were prepared to do. So to your point, we're still, you know, looking at it and we'll come back to the board, but we felt as though for a first take, this was a move in the right direction. And I welcome Joe or Adam or Ralph, who else on the committee, to chime in if you'd like.
Yeah, if I could jump in, Aaron, we thought the same thing, but when it came down to it, it was the fact that if we rose it any higher, we were, and remember, just as far as class size goes, the superintendent has the final decision on whether to accept somebody. So if somebody was coming in Allenwood in 3rd grade or 4th grade, where we may be already, at our limits, we have the opportunity to decline that. It's not like we just have to take them. So I think we were looking at this as an opportunity to obviously raise revenue and put them in classes that may not adversely affect the teaching environment, because it would be going, if a teacher's got 16 or 18, 20 in a class and our preferred maximum is 24, well, going from 19 to 20 isn't a big deal. So again, I think it was where these children are placed is a consideration when we do it. And we decided to raise it 10%. And that's why you'll see the 5,000 went to 55. The other numbers, again, all went up by 10%. The fact that the letters were going out to those parents, notifying them that tuition, would be starting up. We felt that if we went any higher than that maybe people would then leave. And then again, we wouldn't get any revenue from it. So it was a calculated decision on the part to go up 10 with a note to the parents that, hey, it's going up 10, but understand that we may be revisiting this so that we're not selling them a bill of goods. We're telling them that be prepared that there's going to be further escalation of prices as we go. But for this year, it was a 10%. So we're not tricking them into thinking, that next year, if we hit them with another 10 or 15%, they kind of are prepared for that. So I think that's kind of was our thought process, is not to just go from 5,000 to 7,500. And then people say, all right, well, I'm out. And now we're stuck with 3 students, and, there goes $150,000 worth of revenue that we had budgeted in for those students. So that was kind of our thought process.
Adam?
To Russell and Joe's point, we had a pretty substantial conversation about this. There was one other piece as well, and that was that none of the tuition students coming in were special ed. So to take that 17,000 number and use it as a comparable for calculating regular ed tuition rate, they're not able to, they don't get the same level of service that another student normally had. So the 2 numbers were not really equitable to each other. So we went with the 10%, but I think we also decided that we have to go into the next year trying to get a better handle on what a better number is going to be, in trying to arrive at something that's going to be justifiable compared to the level of services that they're getting.
And Ralph, I would just like to add too that, thanks to Aaron's bringing this up, that this is certainly going to be a bigger piece of a puzzle as we go forward in budgeting next year. It's on our radar. We have some ideas that we threw about how to, what goal do we want to have in revenue in this, and so we'll be much more aware of it as we go into budget for next year.
Thank you.
President?
Mr. Krupa?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for those points, because as we all know, that things are ever changing, and I think that the Finance and Police Committee is being humanistic, but at the same time fiscally responsible. Thank you. I appreciate that you're going to go forward with a look-see next year again at those rates.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion on these items?
And I also would like to point out, Mr. Anizio, with regard to tuition, that the tuition items following it for the leadership academy students, with the tuition rate being 14,000, that is not an increase from last year. That is the tuition that it was, in fact, last year.
Thank you.
Stated differently of public comment. So
I actually had one question. Wall Crimson College Academy. I thought we weren't doing that anymore because there was very little enrollment or no enrollment. Is that true, or do we still have some students involved in the program?
Mr. Adizio, can I speak to that, please?
Yes, please.
We have discontinued our partnership with Brookdale Crimson College for new applicants. We are still we still have a memorandum of agreement with Brookdale for our current students who are in the program. I believe we have either 5 or 6, I would have to check, of students who are currently in that program from sophomores to seniors. So once we fully graduate all of those students out, we will dissolve that partnership. That's a pretty rigorous program. It's based upon the AP model. I think it was a great idea when the board and the administration at that time had developed the partnership, but it did not really live up to the expectations both from Wall Township Board of Education as well as Brookdale, and they are recommending that we go to what's called a middle college program. And so that would offer students the opportunity to earn up to 60 credits over the course of their 4 years and in partnership with Brookdale. And they would not come out with an associate's degree, but it's a much more manageable program and a much more manageable credit load for high school students to carry. So we're working on developing that with Brookdale. They're also looking at some other types of on-campus courses that we can offer. But to circle back to your question, you will see that you will be approving the Crimson College partnership for the next 2 years, but we are not accepting any further applicants for that program.
Okay. And with the new thing you mentioned, like middle schools, that'll be a new agreement we'll sign with them?
Yeah, once we finalize that, that's called the middle college program. Basically, instead of getting 120 credits, which is the equivalent of an associate's degree, they would be working towards achieving 60 credits, hence the name middle college program. But yes, once we hammer out all the details of that, it's just a step up from saying dual enrollment. We already have dual enrollment where students can take some courses and earn college credit, but this is a little more formalized program where they have a goal of trying to achieve 60 credits by the end of their senior year. So we absolutely, as we work on that next year, we'll start to put something together and we'll be able to present that to the board.
And just so we know too, this doesn't cost the district anything, correct?
It does not cost the district anything. There is a cost to families for the accreditation of those courses, but it is at a considerable discount to the students. So I don't believe that there's a cost to the district for that program.
Right. I didn't think there was, but I knew there was a substantial savings to students that wanted to take a couple extra credits. So it's good that we're still moving forward and they still have an option and they're not going to be killing themselves doing it.
Absolutely. It's always a benefit for students to be able to, if they should choose to be able to complete some college credit. There's some financial benefit to parents to know that students can, complete some of those and have those towards their either elective courses. And then there's also the other idea where we get students ready for that rigor of college so that they're a little more prepared when they actually start.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gleason.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Krupa.
Dr. Gleason maybe could answer this. How do the students and the parents learn about those dual credit opportunities? How and when do they find out about that?
There are a couple of opportunities that parents and students have. The first would be for the rising freshman class. There are transition meetings that happen. There are parent information nights at the high school, student information nights. And so there are several opportunities at both the middle school in 8th grade and at the high school as they're crossing over. They also have times with their guidance counselors, and the guidance department also promotes the types of opportunities that are available. And it's also in the high school program of studies as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Any questions?
One last question, Ralph. Dr. Gleason, those the middle opportunities, they're all at the colleges, right? Is there any talk of doing those classes virtually? I know it's probably, maybe a year ago, we would have thought it would have been a lot more difficult for, freshmen, sophomores, juniors and seniors in high school to do virtual classes. But, my understanding was the commute was a little bit more difficult too, and that might have, limited some of the participation in that program.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question. That is definitely was one of the challenges because the courses that were being held, with the exception of their senior year, were off campus. And so students did have to, I should say, all of their years had to be able to go to either Camp Evans or the Lincroft campus. The reason why we weren't able to offer on-campus classes, because Brookdale does allow you to do that, is you have to have teachers that have a master's in field. And then they would get certified as an adjunct professor for Brookdale. We have one guidance counselor at the high school that does teach the freshman seminar, and she has a master's in field. But we do not have a significant number of teachers with a master's in a particular field. They may have a master's in teaching, but if it's a science class, they have to have a master's in that science field. And so, relatively speaking, we don't have a large number of teachers. Another discussion, specific to that is looking at our tuition reimbursement plan for teachers and what percentage we reimburse teachers to go back and get their master's in field. And so that could be a discussion for the F&F committee, or certainly as a curriculum committee meeting as well, to discuss moving forward, so that if we wanted to increase the number of teachers that had their master's in field, so we could run more on-campus programs.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Mr. Krupa.
That's me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And this is on item 15, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. I'm a no on letter G. And on letter Y. Everything else I'm a yes. Thank you.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Yes.
Mr. Guards,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
I'm a yes, but I did have the question on the I on the job descriptions. At least I was under the impression that we were going to look at them again. Is that something my vote's not going to matter since they have enough yeses, but I thought we were going to maybe take that out, adjust them, or did Dr. Cram seem to think that was a longer time framed changeover? It wasn't going to be something that we were going to do in the next month or two and come back for approval.
I think it's going to be a longer term.
Okay.
But what we can do is we can start doing them. In other words, like you do with policy, go through the list, look at the ones that have been in place the longest, update them until we get the complete list of job descriptions updated. But we can start that process on a monthly basis.
Okay, so then I'm going to vote yes to everything, and then and we'll keep that on the radar to start bringing some of those in front of the board over the next couple of months. Then, thank you.
and Mr. Addazio.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on, superintendent's report, Dr. Cram.
There are several items under the superintendent's report that I'll be recommending. Maybe for procedural purposes, it might be easier to segregate out A, which is the renewal of the staff for the 2021 school year, deal with that separately, and then come back and talk about D, E, F, and H, which are much less complicated.
Okay. Could I have a motion on 16A?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Hold on, Mr. Addazio.
Oh, yes, Mr. Gartz, I'm sorry.
Why I don't have any discussion about the specific positions and people and hires and such. I just want to make a statement that I think for my own position, it's something that I'm going to look very hard at as we move forward through F&F and as board membership, is the roles and positions that are out there and how it aligns with our organizational chart and our expectations and our I'm not getting into reviews and all that. That's not my job, but I just think we have to look at everything in a very, full full-fledged review going forward for all these positions to make sure that we're using the money wisely and touching on all the areas that we're supposed to be touching on and fulfilling the obligations that were set out in prior years. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a comment too.
Yes, Mr.
Mr. President. I noticed, thank you. I noticed that there are some consistencies in the forms, but I would like to see for a future that all of them have a title description that's more substantial, and also the location with schools and where they're at. And it's just an observation that would make it easier when we're looking at this going forward, like Mr. Gart said.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Chris. Chris? Yeah.
Sorry, Adam, my space bar wasn't working. So just to piggyback off Ralph, and I think that this is something that as a board we have sort of trying to explain during the budgetary process as well, is that we want to make sure that we're crossing T's and dotting I's throughout this, this budget, and making sure that we evaluate things as we go forward here. So I just I wanted to echo Russ's comments on that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Christine? No? Okay. All right, Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Yes.
Mr. Gartz,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Krupa,
I'm a yes, thank you.
and Mr. Adenizio.
Yes, and I abstain on number 13. Dr. Cram?
Yeah, the remaining items in the superintendent's report deal with the revision to the 1920 school calendar, moving the last day of school back to June 16th for students and staff. A recommendation to approve the high school senior class trip to the Walt Disney World in March 2021, which hopefully they will be open and functioning again. The recommendation, the approval of the added district and tuition placements for special education students, and the recommended approval of the travel and professional development expenses. Each of those, or three of those four, have attachments to them explaining the resolutions.
Could I have a motion on those?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Gartz. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sanfilippo. Any discussion?
Dr. Cram, maybe you're not aware, maybe Brian can help, but the trip to Disney, being what it is and the circumstances that we're in, what's the time frame for when they begin? Do they fundraise? Is it just private pay? How's all that go? And when would they start that? Is that going to be affected? And when does the board get to revote on that based on current circumstances of the world at some point in the future?
I don't have any specific answers to that question. My understanding was that this is a traditional trip taken by the senior class. I'm sure all of those questions, I'm sure there's going to be some fundraising and there will be an opportunity. I think the decision as to whether or not they'll go in March of 2021 may very well be taken out of the district's hands if the park is open and functioning, and parents are willing to abide by whatever personal protection arrangements will need to be made for a trip like that at that time. I think there'll be further discussion, but I don't actually know when the fundraising would start or what the activities would be, or if there's an alternative plan for the students to use that money for something other than the trip to Disney World. I know they need to plan it early.
Yeah, just for the record, I am not against the trip in any way, shape, or form, so I don't want to mislead. I just don't want to put the board and the district in a liability purpose for raising money for something that doesn't happen, or, personally, I was a little afraid this go around that they were going to get stuck in Disney and not be able to get home. And we made it out and it was great and thankful and they had a good experience. But, I just think we want to be cautious about it. That's all.
Well, those are all good questions.
One
and
other,
concerns, and if there's no timeliness to this, and I don't know if there is, we'd have to talk to the high school administration about that. If there's no timeliness to that, we could certainly try to find answers to those questions and bring it back to you in June.
my only concern, and I've seen this throughout a number of school districts this year in New Jersey, is if there's any financial obligations or contracts that are going to be signed by either the parents or the school district concerning any of these trips, we have to be very careful, and someone needs to really be apprised as to what they say, because some of the school districts and parents are getting the royal runaround from a lot of travel agencies who have booked these trips for this current year. So I would just put everybody on a caution with regard to executing any agreements concerning this trip. That doesn't mean you can't formally approve that the board wants this trip to move forward, but if there's going to be contracts signed, let's be very careful about that.
Anybody have anything else?
Yeah, so, Mr. President, being that.
I'm sorry, Andy, you're breaking up. Andy, we can't hear you. Andy, we can't hear you. Sorry, Andy, we can't hear you. We'll come back. Does anybody have anything else? No? I think Andy's frozen. Let's just give him a second. Go ahead, Mr. Sanfilippo.
I just wanted to say it's nice to get back those 3 days as well. I think that was something that was a good decision by the board.
Andy is still frozen. Let's just give him a second to see who's going to come back in. There he is. Mr. Krupa, welcome back. Go ahead. He's frozen again.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Yeah, the professional development workshops. First, I want to preference that I'm in favor of staff development for all of our teachers and staff, but there still doesn't seem to be enough information in our formatted use of this in regards to what is that workshop, number one, and the description could include a link under the name.
Andy.
And then also the teacher position, what do they do, and what is their?
Andy, you broke up. I'm not sure. Dr. Cram, did you get enough of that?
I understand what Mr. Cooper's asking, and I'm going to defer to Dr. Gleason to answer those questions.
Could I just get a recap? Was he looking for some justification on the?
Yeah, he's suggesting that we provide more information. He'd like to know what the positions of those individuals are in the district and what the nature of the workshop is. And he suggested that it might be useful to have a link when it's possible so that somebody could go, click on it and see exactly what the substance of the workshop is.
I think we talked about that at one point, and certainly we can discuss that again as part of my position as the director of curriculum in improving all the professional development that flows through the district. It might be even more helpful if there are questions prior to the board meeting that I can give a more detailed rationale for those requests. I don't know in some cases if the link to a website or a registration form is really going to provide the kind of information that a board member may want. So I would suggest, certainly with respect, that if you had a question about anybody on the PD travel, when you get that report on prior to the board meeting, that I could answer those questions more in depth.
That's great. One of the things that I think is my hidden agenda is that as people become more aware of the training that teachers and other staff members go through, the value for us is built in the public's eyes by knowing that this is what teachers have to do. This is what staff members do. This is how Wall stays on the cutting edge. So it's not just for me or any board member. It's just, and even if it isn't of interest to the public that's watching, I can speak to it when something is brought up to me on a personal or a public level.
And that I appreciate that, Andy. That makes good sense. And we may even be able to do what may be even more helpful would be to just modify that travel PD report form and just include a small blurb in there as a rationale that actually flows through the request process. So that may be a helpful first start. And we can certainly talk about that. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Nice, seeing none. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Can't hear you, Ken.
Mr.
Your microphone's not on, Mike, Ken.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Guards,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Krupa,
Yes.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
and Mr. Adenizio.
Yes, thank you. Business office, Mr. Smythe?
Ask for a motion to approve by consent agenda items 17A through F.
Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Gartz, could I have a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Mr. These are Adam. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Smythe?
Mr. Sanfilippo,
Yes.
Ms. Stites,
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak,
Yes.
Mr. Guards,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Krupa,
I'm a yes.
Ms. Mangan,
Yes.
Mr. Nasser,
Yes.
and Mr. Adenizio.
Yes. Thank you. This time we'll open up for public comment. Please raise your hand.
Hi, it's Betsy Cross. Yeah, Mr. Adenizio, when we were talking about that policy for a supervisor of construction, and you said you were able to just click on it and find it, could you go through the steps that you went through to find it?
It's go to the website. You can click on the link and you can get to it that way.
No, I just did it. And that's what I did when I was talking on the phone. So you walk through it with me right now because you said that's exactly what you did.
Ms. Cross, please ask your questions or comments.
No, you all just approved something that you don't have on your website. And that's exactly what Wall Municipal was trying to do a couple of weeks ago. So when you click on your link, it does not work. So how do you approve a second reading for something when you click on it, it does not show up? So Mr. Gross, I'm going to ask you to click on it and make sure that what I'm saying is correct, because everybody just
It's the
voted
first
on
reading.
something. What?
First reading.
It's not the first reading. It's just, Mr. Kramer, wasn't that the second reading? Could you answer that question, please?
It was the first reading.
It was what? The first or the second?
First reading,
For which? The construction?
yes.
All of them.
For everything this evening, it was a first reading.
And when you click on the link, what does it show you?
Do you have questions, Ms. Cross?
I do. Can you click on that link?
I already did. Thank you.
And what does it show you?
Please ask all your questions.
I'm gonna go over, you didn't go over what the update is on the Central School trailers. Can you go over that and then I can ask any additional questions that I have?
Ms. Cross, we said before, we are not giving updates on the trailers. We are not talking about that.
Oh, that's weird, because Mr. Nasser emailed me today and said you were gonna give an update tonight on the trailers. So let me give you my update on the trailers. So it looks like that Mr. Smythe put in a request. He dated it the day before that it seems that you even knew you had the approval for the trailers, and it was dated on the 4th of May. And you have Mike Monahan actually fill out the paperwork, and he has no prices. He doesn't date it. Mr. Smythe also doesn't date his document. Then we have a document for plumbing, and it's mentioned that all the plumbing is only going to cost $100. Could you go over tonight how it's only going to be $100 when in the architectural plans it was going to be $5,000? Then I'd also like to know how Mike Monahan signs for the electrical work. He says it's only going to cost $350. Meanwhile, your architectural plans say it's going to be $5,000. So what in the world is going on here, and what are you trying to hide? So there are loads of Oprahs that Mr. Smythe is looking to give after it looks like you're looking to demo the trailers. So maybe Mr. Smythe and you, Mr. Adonisio, you can go on the record tonight, and Mr. Nasser, and you can let me know how much did we pay Mobile Lease for the trailers and the installation. And
What
then,
year,
Mr.
what year
Hall,
was that, Ms. Cross?
you don't know what year you bought the trailers? You're the president. You should know that, Mr. Adonisio.
Oh, from almost 20 years ago? Okay.
Yep, almost 20 years ago. Then when you answer those questions and when you send it in writing, I'll let Mr. Hall know exactly where I got that exhibit, because I think it's very interesting. So, Mr. Nasser, I wrote you back today. You keep going back to me, and I keep going right back. Let me know how much we paid Mobile Lease for the trailers. How much did we pay for the installation? How much part of the $1.4 million lease agreement went to Mobile Lease? Who were the contractors? What were they paid? What did we buy? And did we buy items that we actually paid for out of our own budget? So I sent you back those items, Mr. Nasser, that I got back in 2011. So luckily I still have them. So Mr. Smythe, I don't know if he still has them, but I still have them. And I just sent them back to you. I'd like Mr. Smythe to point out where that $313,000 went. It's not that difficult. Just say where it is. Was it a check? Was it a wire transfer? And who got the money? I'm tired of wasting my time on this. These are very simple questions.
Thank
So
you, Ms. Cross. Your time is up. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, so to answer a couple of those questions, because we have been going back and forth. I mean, Ms. Cross has some legitimate questions, so we're gonna look into them on the F&F, and we have been. She asked how much the trailers were. The trailers, when they were done, were $330,484. That's how much they were. She was told that. She's been given documentation. She's had documentation since December on it. Took me a little while to go through all the documentation, confirm that. I sent it back today, so she does have that. With regards to the differing prices, those are architectural estimates for an outside contractor to do it. We're doing it in-house, so there's going to be a little bit of a difference. If Mr. Smythe, I mean, going the 2011 comment, again, we got her last email within the past hour and a half, so obviously we've been on this call, haven't had a chance to go through it, but I will, as I have every email and every Oprah that she's requested, looked at it and come to an assessment on our own through a lens that I am familiar with, and we will continue to look into it on F&F and ask questions as we have done. Mr. Smythe, do you have anything?
Well, I'll add with regard to the difference between, and she didn't specifically clarify what the document was with the date of May 4th, but I believe it was the permit application we made to the municipality. And with regard to the submission of the permit application, it is regardless of when we would receive or did receive approval from the Department of Education to remove the trailers. The permit application submission was not contingent on that approval. So we made the submission. With regard to the cost to disconnect a plumbing line and cap it by our in-house staff, and then to have the line removed as part of the demolition, that's why the plumbing cost is only $100, because all they're doing is disconnecting a line or removing a valve and capping the pipe. Very similar to the electric, we're removing a breaker and disconnecting a service from a panel that's in the school that serves the trailers. So the cost estimate provided by operations for the materials they're buying or the work they're doing, I'm sure is accurate. And again, the cost estimate that Ms. Cross is referring to is a cost estimate provided by the architect when we submit to the Department of Education, which their total cost was about $80,000. So we have the county doing the work for $32,000 plus the tipping fees we have to pay at the landfill, and then whatever materials and labor our in-house staff to disconnect the utilities. With regard to something about 2011, I'm not familiar with it. The cost of the trailers that were part of the lease purchase that has been provided, the original contract, $339,000. There was a credit change order by the end of the project given back to the school district. So I believe Mr. Nasser gave the accurate number, what the final amount was paid to Mobile Lease for the purchase and installation of the trailers. There was no other subcontractors paid. Any additional work that was done at the trailers during the installation was done by district staff. With regard to the $1.4 million lease purchase, that was a lease purchase that was made for the items that were included in the budget for that year. So we had a capital projects budget which identified a number of projects that totaled $1,410,000 that was included in the budget. And when the budget was defeated, the final budget that was approved after discussions with the municipality and them approving a tax levy required that the lump sum cost of the $1.4 million for the projects was going to be removed from the budget. The tax levy would be reduced accordingly. And the recommendation was to lease purchase those capital projects or fund the projects with a lease purchase agreement, with the first payment to be in the subsequent school year, not even in the year in question. So that is what was done. In addition to the central school trailers that were part of it, and they were estimated as from the architect $600,000, we went to bid. The award was for $339,000, has been said multiple times. In addition to that, we had building access control systems that were being installed in all the schools. That was part of the budget, and it was financed through the lease purchase. We had the gym lighting improvements at the high school. That was included in the budget and then became part of the lease purchase. We had locker replacements at the high school. We had security camera systems at the intermediate school. We had site lighting at the intermediate school in the faculty parking lot. The design and contingency costs that were part of all those projects were included. In addition, we had a MyTel phone system district-wide that was included in the budget and then was financed through the lease purchase. We had computer servers for the district's mainframe that was located at the high school was included, as well as additional technology equipment from Apple computer equipment to disk array equipment that was all services the district's network from technology. When additional funds were available, I don't have the projects, they were not included in the original lease, but because of the cost of the trailers being less than the original estimate, additional projects, which would have to be approved by the Board of Education and approved by Chase Leasing, if they were able to be funded through the project, then they would have been funded through the project. And the district paid in accordance with the terms of the Chase lease purchase agreement, paid the Chase lease, the principal and interest on those, on that $1.4 million in the subsequent 5 years, and they were all included in the budget. With regard to where those payments are budgeted, I know last board meeting, there was lots of statements that, contradicted, the truth or what I had said, that I knowingly put it in the wrong account because I said lease purchases go in a different account. But there was an explanation that I said I put it there because the Department of Education told me to. That's not the case. The lease purchase for the trailers, which is under equipment or operations equipment, it's under facilities, gets charged to an appropriate account for those facilities. The same account where you would budget for and expense water and sewer costs. They happen to be the same account. It's a purchase services account. It's not a lease purchase account. The title is a purchase services account, and it's for facilities or operations. The other account that was referenced and documents being emailed to everyone is for lease purchase of school buses. Lease purchase of school buses does not get budgeted or expensed in an operations or facilities account. It gets budgeted and expensed out of a student transportation account. And that's been the case every year for the last probably 20 years, that we have budgeted and purchased and lease purchased school buses out of that account. So the account that the repayment to lease to Chase equipment for the lease purchase was budgeted in the correct account.
Adam, did you have something else?
Yeah, I did want to follow up on that as well, because we looked into what Brian stated, and it clearly states in the chart of accounts for public schools, it's very dry reading. I don't suggest it unless you have a multitude of time available, but it quite literally says water, sewer, and lease purchase agreements for, I don't know why, that's what the state wants. But I did want to talk about the OPA records on this, and this is where it OPA requests are going to come back blank. Why? Because the state has a records retention schedule. The records retention schedule dictates how long we hang on to certain pieces of paperwork. It's very comprehensive and very detailed. If there are OPA requests getting kicked back, a lot of times it's a form letter Brian sending back. It doesn't have why. It just says that it's not available, and it's not available because it's been discarded per the records retention schedule. Corporations have this. This is not something that's out of unusual in any way, shape, or form. But I did promise Ms. Cross I would ask Brian for one thing, and that was I was looking at the documentation on the purchase orders for the lease purchase payments, and the first year one I couldn't find. Can you send that again, Brian, to myself so that I can include it in a response to Betsy, and we can continue this dialogue to try to answer as many of the questions that she has as possible, and the rest of the public. I mean, I'm probably one of the few people. I do appreciate the questions. I appreciate the information, but being able to link the two with citations and evidence is essential for us as board members to be able to investigate and look at it ourselves and come to a conclusion. Similar to Dr. Cram doing his investigation, he's looking at the same stuff. So we're all going to look at it through a different lens. We're all going to look at it with a different understanding, but it's on us to come to our own conclusions given the evidence that we have. Obviously, the more the better. So I appreciate everybody's patience listening to me, and go from there.
Thank you. Mr. Gartz?
Well, just to address that, we'll do an additional review with regard to a purchase order in the first of the 5 years of payments. Although if there was a purchase order in that year, it would have been provided. There was an account analysis for that year that was provided in response to the OPA request. So The request was for all the purchase orders issued to Chase Equipment Leasing. They were all provided, which I believe were the 4 years, year 2 through 5. When you're paying a lease purchase to Chase Equipment Leasing over 5 years in the amount of $330,000, we don't typically cut a check. So in the first year or in those years, there were wire transfers, I believe. I don't know whether they were ACHs or wire transfers. I can review. But one way to handle that transaction is to make the wire transfer and then do a disbursement adjustment against the account, which is a general ledger entry. And it's basically a one-sided transfer, which shows that you've expensed the funds and you identify the vendor. In the account analysis that was provided, it says exactly that. It says a disbursement adjustment. It identifies to who, it identifies what the dollar amount, and there was a handwritten note on there that identified what the purpose of it was for. In subsequent years, there were probably still wire transfers, but typically when you're doing a purchase order, it hits the bills list, there's a check that's cut, and over between the first year and the second year, it was determined that we could do a purchase order with, and I'm somewhat speculating with regard to what had transpired between the first year and the second year, where we've done a non-AP purchase order where we're not really printing or processing a purchase order. We're just entering one in the system because a check is not going to be generated from that, because the payment to Chase Equipment Leasing is going to be by wire transfer, but it is recorded in each of the 5 years that the payments were made. And that was reviewed through the audit process each one of those years.
Russell?
Yes, as Adam stated, as the chairman of the F&F committee, the F&F committee is listening to what Ms. Cross is saying and respects her rights to inquire. I think it's important for the public to know that the F&F committee, and as by way of a representative of the board, to know that this search on this situation from 2007 is not a priority. We will do our best to answer the questions as we can, and there are many other ways to send this information that Ms. Cross has to authorities that may want to investigate this if there's such cause. But as Brian said, there was, and I read it myself and Adam read it, and I'm sure Dr. Krem's read it, and Brian knows it because he lived it, 3, 4, 5, 10, 13 years of audits that never turned up anything about these payments in their review. And it was 13 years ago, and we have potentially a significant amount of millions of dollars that won't come to us this year because of state aid changes. We are looking to review professionals going forward. We have a new superintendent. We are looking forward to moving this district forward at this point in time. And while we will address these issues as we can, it is not as high a priority for us as an F&F committee as it is for Ms. Cross. So I just want that the public to know that.
Thank you. I am actually going to jump back to public comment because we did have someone raise their hand a little late, so I don't want to knock them out. Samantha?
Hi, yes, good evening. Dr. Cram, I sent you an email today, and I won't go over all that tonight, except to say that the issues with the trailers, yes, of course, are about the trailers, but they're also about bigger picture issues within this district. And I'm thinking, right now as a parent, when we reopen these schools, I'm going to have to trust, and other parents in the district are going to have to trust, that the decision makers in the district are prioritizing the health and safety of our kids. So to me, this review and the changes to both policy and process that are going to be made by the Board of Education as a result of your findings of how and why things went so very wrong with this whole situation over the past, year and a half, are directly related to parents being able to trust this district and the decision makers in it that are going to prioritize the health and safety of not just our kids, but the whole staff and the teachers and everyone that works in the schools as we're going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now public comment is closed. Any board members have any comments?
Hey, Ralph.
Yes, Mr.
I'm
Brooks.
sorry. I just want to make clear that my comments about priorities were about the purchase of those trailers 13 years ago as being not a priority, not the health and safety of children and the more recent situation of the trailers of which Dr. Cram is investigating. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Mr. Sanfilippo.
I'll go last if somebody else wants to go.
Okay.
Before.
Mr. President, I'd
Yes.
just like to give a brief response to our most recent speaker. I did get an email from her today, and it was very well written and expressed all of the concerns that I've been hearing since I've been in the district. And I think we have to remember that there are a number of different things going on here. And I think she spoke, Mrs. Bassett spoke to one that dimension to this that I think we have to give more consideration to. There have been questions about the accounting, and I think they will be relatively easy to answer from the audits and the documentation that are being provided, although going back 13 years is difficult. There have been some questions about, more importantly, there have been questions about the degree to which the trailers were well maintained over the period of time that they were here in the district. And there may have been some missteps with respect to that. And they center on two areas. One is the reporting procedures within the district, who knew what, when, and what was being done about it. And I think we all agree that the internal communications could have been better, not only on that instance, but on a lot of instances within the district. But the last point that she brought up is the transparency with the public, which I think again was maybe a misstep. That there were reasonable requests for some information with regards to the trailer. There were some legitimate concerns, obviously, about the health and welfare of the students when the trailers were being occupied. I think we're very fortunate that there have been no serious complaints about environmental hazards or injuries, with regard to the trailers. And I think right now the focus has to be to get the trailers out of here. I think a lot of the questions have been answered. The issue of the transparency with the public, there's no automatic redress for that. It's just going to be a reflection of how the board operates going forward in trying to respond to the concerns of parents in the community.
Can't hear you, Ralph.
Ralph, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay. I'm sorry. Adam, did you have something?
Yeah, I did, because this is, Ms. Bassett brings up a great point, and this is something I can speak to just from as a professional and as a colleague, trying to weigh how to bring the students back is an incredibly difficult concept right now in putting together how the health and safety looks like it. I want to point out the immediate concern isn't bringing back the students as much as it is creating a place where the staff, because the staff is initially going to be there first, is going to be safe and not have to worry about their health. From that, the students and the conditions for the students grow from that. So from a foundational standpoint, creating a safe place for the staff is paramount. There are a lot of things to work through. I know I've been going back and forth with Nick, just sharing resources. There's a lot of our facilities folks that have been commenting at length with the state all the way up to the commissioner's office. We were given the ability to share our feelings and share our thoughts. And I know that got factored into it, and I know it will continue to be factored into it. But I can say that I am sure that that consideration, and not just growing from the trailers, I mean, growing from everything, excuse me, is something that is going to be on our minds, everybody's minds, from board members to the teachers to the administrators to anybody that walks into the building. a lot of things are going to change, and it's going to be up to us to create an overall environment for us to operate in that's going to be safe. So while I appreciate the work that Dr. Cram is doing, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from it and implement it, I think it was time for that anyway, and we're going to have to be able to do that so that the parents, the students, everybody, the community as a whole feels safe coming into our buildings once this all ends. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to do a policy since there was a problem finding it. Number 14 on policy, where it says policies can be obtained by clicking here. You click on the here, and it brings you to a page where it lists all the committees on the left-hand side. You click on Policy Committee 2020, and then that brings you to another page where it lists the members of the Policy Committee and the schedules. And as you scroll down, you go to the May 5th date, May 5th, 2020. You click on first reading, and all the policies that were on the agenda tonight are listed there. So it's pretty simple to find. So I just wanted to clarify that to everybody out there, just in case they had a question about that. Ms. Stites.
Yes, I just wanted to briefly say that I appreciate the commentary from the public, and I would like to say that myself, and I feel like I speak for all the members of the board, always have the safety and welfare of our students and our staff are always in the forefront. We are certainly, we're approaching a new day in Wall Township, and I, for one, and again, I think I can speak for the board, are really committed to, maybe having some new communication styles. And we want the public to understand that we're really working on behalf of our community. We're your community members. You're our community members. This is, kind of a collective effort. So I appreciate Mrs. Bassett's comments that she made, and we certainly take them to heart. And it takes some time, but we're going to get there. And we just appreciate, the cooperation.
Thank you. Did anybody else, before I go to Chris? Okay, Andy?
I have a comment about some upcoming activities for the Monmouth County and New Jersey school boards. Can I say it now?
Sure.
All right, so this week, as a representative, I'll be going to the Monmouth County School Board's meeting, which is virtual, and that's Thursday, I think. And then tomorrow, I'm attending the full-day virtual school technology conference, which is a workshop by the New Jersey School Boards Association. So if anybody has any needs or interest in those events or wants me to bring back something, I will do that. Just shoot me an email. And happy birthday to you, Ralph. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Sanfilippo. Can't hear you.
He stole my thunder. You guys both stole my comment. I should have said it before. No, I want to say happy birthday, Ralph, and also mention that the policies are up there. So that's all. Thanks for stealing my happy birthday, Andy.
Thank you very much. Anybody have anything else? No? Could we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Motion, Mr. Sanfilippo, second, Mr. Gartz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Everybody have a good night. Everybody stay safe.
Good night.
Good night.